So let's talk a little bit about how we recommend subs and what are some of the criteria we look at, because we are really, really specific. These are not casual, oh, well, everything above this price point gets this subwoofer, everything below that price point gets this one. It is not a rote exercise. And it can be confusing to people on both ends of the scale. I was just in Munich a couple weeks ago, and really one of our best distributors anywhere in the world sells, I don't know, 30, 40, maybe 66 packs a year. They're fantastic, they're wonderful people, warm, encouraging. And I asked him, I said, you know, I'm really curious. You sell an enormous number of 812 six packs, but almost no 510s. What's going on with that? And they said, oh, you know, in our market, wealthy guys, if they're gonna go for it, they're gonna go for the best. So it'll either be an 812 or something like a carbon special for that size and caliber of speaker. If they're gonna do the refs, they're gonna do ref 32s. Only like if they really couldn't fit it through the door would they do a 31. So it's just sort of a pride and ego thing. They're like, hey, you know, if I can afford it, I'm just gonna go as far as I can go. On the other end of things, we have people who underbuy subwoofers like crazy. Right, who get a T5X when what was really needed for that system was a pair of T9Xs. The room, the speakers really would benefit from it. So I thought we would actually share a little bit about how we, and what we listen for, both in the field and in our development studios. So there are a few different things. First of all, don't make the mistake of thinking you can shade a class. What do I mean by that? TX is one class and category of subwoofers. They're our best all-arounders. They're an incredible value. They don't cost much for all the cool things they do. Then the step up is to Series S. When we say you need a Series S, you need a Series S. They do everything better by a lot. So we see these kinds of transition points as areas of confusion for people. Do I do, maybe do I do like 2 of the T9Xs or 1 of the S510s or even an 812 depending on the speaker? That's a confusion point, and we'll clarify that. But the difference in speed, in solidity, in depth, in slam, in extension, low bass on a 510 is a profoundly better experience than a T9X or even a pair of T9Xs. Does that make the T9X lesser or bad? Not at all. It's developed for speakers that don't have those kinds of characteristics that need that. So what do we listen for? We listen for all of the things I just mentioned and a bunch of others. But the first thing as we start to go down through our punch list is, what's the speed of the speaker? Is this a really fast sounding, transient intensive speaker? Or is it something that's just a pleasant all-arounder? That right there may be the offset difference between a Series S on one hand and a TX on the other. Remember, the TXs are faster than almost all the speakers are likely to be paired with. So it's not a matter of slow versus fast. Both of them are fast, one is faster. Then we start looking at scale. How big a sound is this speaker pairing likely to be able to make, right? If you're talking about something like, Bowers & Wilkins 702 D3s, that's a $5,000 pair of speakers. They make a pleasant, medium-sized soundstage. It's a really nice speaker, really beautifully balanced top to bottom, doesn't really do anything wrong for the money. That's a pairing where a pair of T9Xs works brilliantly. Start with a single, add the second one later. We've got no agenda around that. But that's a perfect T9X pairing. Then you start going up into things like, I'm just staying within Bowers & Wilkins so people don't think I'm jumping from line to line and confusing or showing preference. Go up to their 800 series. Go up to something like an 803 or an 804. You are no longer pairing with 9Xs. That's immediately at least an S510 pair. Fast speakers really benefit from pairs because pairs are not about more bass. They're about being able to get perfect left and right. No room is symmetrical. The better the speaker is, the more you hear those kinds of things. You don't necessarily know why, but what it results in is a very narrow, dark sound stage. Everything sounds great up front, but as you get back into the drum kit and things back here, it gets narrower and narrower. And stereo pairs open up the outer 2/3 of the sound stage. So by the time we get up to S's, you'll see far more S's being sold as stereo pairs or eventually even 6-packs because of the clarity, the illumination. So we need to know the scale of the system. starting with the speakers. Of course, it has to be supported by the electronics. It's a system after all. That gets us into S versus TX, or ref versus S. And there's that step up, right? Some of these reference speakers, oh my gosh, things like the modern Wilsons, the modern Rockports, the YGs, these are very quick speakers. And so you'll see us call out the need for a reference, a number 31 or a 32, depending on scale of room, when you start getting up in the upper end of those models. It's not an artifact, it's not a pretense, it's real. So we listen for scale, we listen for bass extension. Right? The bigger a subwoofer is in terms of its ability to go down deep and play loud, the less high it can extend. So a speaker that's very competent, that can, in a real world sense, go down into the middle 30s, for example, we really need a sub that's good from 20 or below up to about 28 hertz. You take something that's a small speaker. My partner owns a pair of B&W 705 D3s. And it's a lovely speaker, but the speaker is in most rooms, gone by 55, 58 hertz, something like that. And so he runs it with a pair of T7Xs. It's a beautiful blend. Horses for courses, right? These things have to match. During the course of development, so this is a sort of just amplification on what we listen for, we spend probably as much, if not more time, listening to the blend, the speed, the transition between a good main speaker and the sub, and the way things like, believe it or not, cymbals sound in the mix. People make the mistake all the time of thinking a subwoofer is about bass. Buying the subwoofer for bass. You buy a REL, you're going to get the bass, and you're going to get about 8 to 9 octaves above that improve. That's the shocking thing for most people. They start calling us going, oh my gosh, am I nuts, or is it really improving, like the upper mid-range and cymbals and air and all these other things? You're not nuts. It's how physics works. When you correct what's going on down low, all the harmonics rise. You know, if we're talking about a REL that is died and gone by, say, 50 hertz, you know, going up to 10 kilohertz, what do we have? 5 octaves? That's not very far in mathematical terms, right? We're going to 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200. We're at 6400 in 7 octaves, just boom, and that's from 50 hertz. So these things all make sense when you understand how to listen organically to these things, and we do. I've got one cut I listen to that when we're 98% sure we've got it right. It's a beautiful, kind of slow, moody piece, and it starts off with the drummer taking the edge of his kind of chewed up drumsticks, so they have some friction to them, and he literally puts it on the ride cymbal and starts the piece by drawing it down the edge of the ride cymbal, and the cymbal just floats into the room. You just hear this whoosh, and it rings there for about 15, 20 seconds as the music folds in. How the system does that is exactly dependent on how good a job we've done on our crossovers. So these are some of the things that are not apparent. And that's why it's so critical to get the S510 versus T9X, to get the carbon special instead of the 812, depending on how refined your system is, to get a number 31 instead of a carbon special. To get those jumps right are really important. It will result in just an immensely more enjoyable experience at home. One quick note I want to make, there are no sub recommendations on our subwoofer pairing tool that got arrived at generically. Not one. In most cases, at least 3 to 4 members of our team around the world have had experience with them in different sized rooms with different systems, particularly as you get up into the upper end things. We really care very deeply about our recommendations for all levels, but as you get up into true reference Grand Cru level products, it's extremely important to our integrity, our reputation in the industry, that when we say that's a pair of carbon specials or a 6-pack, it's because we know it flat cold. We've heard those speakers in 5 different rooms, 3 different people have set them up and dialed them in, we've all compared notes. We get it. That is the consensus. And we listen very carefully. You know, when we go into a room, which is, you know, for customers, it's not all that often, but we do it all the time, you know, 15, 20 times a day worldwide in dealer showrooms. When we go in, the first thing we do is we nail the speaker set. Don't be surprised if you own a store, if we come in and we spend an hour and a half, 2 hours dialing in your speakers. At that point, the REL setup is like 12 minutes. Our dictum is to get the system perfect, not to make bass. So we get the system physically dialed into the room, getting that sounding as best we can within a reasonable scope of time. And then we dial in the REL or RELs. And that portion of it we can do in our sleep. But it's really important that you understand that this is not a generic, gosh, every speaker above $2,000 needs our flagship speaker. And we see that on other websites. We see people taking a pretty lazy, careless approach to this. It allows you to do something that some customers find really appealing. There's like 10,000 speakers that have been made over the last 20 years. And some of these websites, like literally claim to have recommendations for all 10,000 pairings, except they're not. They're simply taking price points and doing price point engineering. We're just not going to do that. That's ridiculous. So when you look at our speaker pairings, our speaker to subwoofer pairings, it's very specific. It is learned. It may take months or a year. If you just got your speakers, they're the hottest, coolest new thing, and we don't have it up there, it's because we haven't worked with it long enough to have an informed, really mature opinion of the best pairing. You can call us in. Often we'll share our interim experiences, but we're not going to put that up there until we know what works in what sized rooms, what combinations of gear, and exactly the right pairing for that. And oftentimes the customer doesn't even know. They don't even know what their speakers are capable of. I don't mean they don't know their sub. I don't expect them to. But they don't understand what their speakers can do, and you start talking with them and you go, no, okay. In a game in which millimeters matters a lot, you're off by a couple of meters. You're not even close. Please get your speakers properly set up, then we can have a lengthier conversation about how to integrate a pair of RELs with your speakers.